Of course, I have with me here this morning my colleague, parliamentary and cabinet colleague, the Honorable Keith Scotland, Senior Counsel, Minister in the Ministry of National Security, as well Madam Erla here with Christopher, Commissioner of Police, and several members of the executive of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, all who have been identified by the Police Commissioner to address particular aspects of the crime problem that we are challenged with in Trinidad and Tobago. And of course, at the head table as well, the Chief of Defense Staff, Air Vice Marshal Daryl Daniel, and the formation commanders of the regiment, the Coast Guard, the Air Guard, and of course, the operations officer of the Trinidad and Tobago Defense Force here with us today. It is well known to the national community that we are pressed as a nation with severe levels of criminal activity. Over the last 48 hours, I am told that we would have lost 10 to 11 souls, citizens and in some cases non-nationals of Trinidad and Tobago across the country. I do understand, as a member of parliament, as a person, as a citizen of this country, the serious levels of pain and anguish and fear and trauma and disquiet that that kind of activity is causing across Trinidad and Tobago. The government understands this quite clearly. We understand equally that you, the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, are entitled to expect the law enforcement platform in Trinidad and Tobago, mandated under the law, sworn and paid for those purposes, to deal with these issues, to stand in the gap to protect you, the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, from the criminals and their criminal onslaught. An onslaught that has seen young girls in increasing numbers, women, old and young, being slaughtered among the numbers that we speak about in the murder and the crime statistics. For example, very quickly, I saw a video a couple of days ago of an incident that I'm told by the police might have taken place in a bar in Barakpur, where a man was there plunging a weapon, a knife, into the body of a woman with whom I am told he might have had a relationship. You may call that domestic, but it occurred. And when an elderly woman approached him, probably thinking in her innocent mind that she could placate him and cause him to stop, he launched an attack on her as well. We saw just day before yesterday, I think it was, a worker on the compound of a health institution in St. James, operated by the NWRHA, the Northwest Regional Health Authority, lose his life while working on the compound. Of course, we understand the trauma that that would have caused. Again, and I say again because not too long ago, the Commissioner and I would have visited the scene of a murder, the scene of additional shooting in both Gonzales and on the compound of the Port of Spain General Hospital, causing the staff to become very, very traumatized and wondering what next. Of course, only yesterday reports came in about 3 Trinidadians losing their lives, I think on a beach in Cedras, in yet under investigation circumstances. Let me put it like that. Don't know, but the matter is being investigated. and a couple Venezuelans, I think 3 of them being shot in a separate event not far in time or distance from that scene that I have just partly described. And last night alone, reports have come, another 3 in the, I would say, East Port-of-Spain area, Malik and environs. So I know the trauma. The government knows the trauma you feel. And we all want a resolution to this. In consequence, the National Security Council met yesterday, and we met with all of the heads of the law enforcement fraternity led by the Commissioner of Police and her deputies, the Chief of Defense Staff, and others. And arising out of that, a decision was taken that we will come to the people of Trinidad and Tobago today so that those who lead our law enforcement efforts on the ground in the reality of things out there, in the hurly-burly and the fight against crime and criminality, will share with you, the national community, what they are doing and what they are about to do in response to these very pressing and traumatic circumstances. With those few words said, I would therefore like to make the floor available to the Commissioner of Police, who will begin our interface with you, the media, as we seek to communicate with the people of Trinidad and Tobago. When we are through in this, the Chief of Defense Staff will indicate to you the role of the Defense Force in this, and then we'll make the platform of law enforcement available to you, members of the media, for questions. All of the officers are here on the National Security or Law Enforcement platform, and they will be available for your questions in terms. Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you very much, Minister. A pleasant afternoon to the viewing and listening public of Trinidad and Tobago. Trinidad, and unfortunately Tobago, has experienced an escalation, specifically in relation to homicides and home invasions. Prior to this escalation, the TTPS had embarked on an intensification of our initiatives to reduce violent crime across all policing divisions. Those initiatives were detailed, intelligence-driven, and were being effectively operationalized. Those initiatives proved effective in delivering the results we were targeting. Unfortunately, the criminal element does not stand still. They recognize our encroachment, and not unexpectedly, they quickly adjusted their modus operandi. As a result, we have increased our surveillance and modified our strategies to remain effective in battling the criminals. This dynamic, we expect, will continue for a while. Meanwhile, our focus will be on continuously reviewing and updating our strategies and continuing to conduct operations to effectively push back against the criminals, effecting arrests and reducing the incidence of violent crime, particularly homicides, the attempts at extortion, and home invasions. We maintain a high level of confidence in our operations, and our emphasis will be on maintaining proactive strategies and focusing on ensuring that there is continued effective implementation on a widespread and sustained basis. To stem the spate of homicides, from an operational perspective, we have intensified special operations. Approximately 55% of our murders are either gang or drug-related. We have developed a multi-agency approach to address criminal gang activities and the increase in homicides. We have identified suspects, and we are focused on using all available means to get justice and to bring them before the court. We have a deliberate and consistent focus on the retrieval of firearms, and this collaboration includes the Customs and Excise, the Port Authority, and the Prison Service. All our operations are assisted and cooperated with the Trinidad and Tobago Defense Force. In terms of intelligence, we work directly with the SSA, who will guide us with their intelligence. In terms of home invasions, we are focusing on educating the national population on target hardening. In addition, we are focusing on the use of technology. We have introduced the Eagle Eye project, which has been disseminated also in other divisions other than Tunapuna. In terms of extortion, we have identified a strategic, deliberate, dedicated team under the supervision of Mr. Richard Smith to control events of extortion. And I want to today speak to the business community. We know we are challenged and that there is a fear in reporting. But know that if you call Mr. Smith, you will have that direct communication and confidentiality in your reports. What we have identified persons in each division so that there will be a coordinated approach by Mr. Smith. In terms of all our other activities, I want to take this opportunity to thank all our stakeholders. We are using all the resources available to us. So we have begun the communication and the conversation with other stakeholders to work with us to increase our visibility. And in that vein, being the Commissioner of Police, I think it is fair enough to commend some of our security agencies. So we'll all hands on deck, all police officers on deck, all members of under the umbrella of national security. We work with the Immigration Department, as indicated, the Customs and Excise, the ports, the prisons. We know we identified problems in the prisons, and we have a healthy relationship with the Commissioner of Prisons, and we are making very good success and interventions in the prisons. I want to advise the national community that we have a proliferation of females involved in gang activities. We also have whether legal or illegal migrants involved in criminal activities. So we want to speak to the illegal migrants to let them know that we will be coming after them. In our bars, with all the illicit activities, we'll be coming after them. We want to advise the parents, because we have children involved in criminal activities, and we are going to use the legislation and hold parents accountable for the activities of their children. Ladies and gentlemen, I have with me this afternoon Deputy Commissioners Junior Benjamin, Natasha George, Suzette Martin, Assistant Commissioner Winston Maharaj, and Assistant Commissioner Vina Butler, Senior Superintendent Richard Smith, and Senior Superintendent Rishi Singh. And they are here to answer any questions you may have. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Chief of Defense Staff.
Thank you very much, Honourable Minister, Minister Scotland, Commissioner of Police, senior Defense Force officers, senior members of the TTPS, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. The Defense Force continues to be available at the beck and call of the police in accordance with the provisions of the Defense Act to support law enforcement in its operations. You will continue to see us on the ground there with the police, and when necessary, we will ramp up the numbers for specific operations. With respect to our specific role, in particular the maritime domain awareness and control, I would like to highlight that you would be aware of the challenges we have in particular with the Coast Guard presently, but to advise that approval has been received and is being actioned for the immediate repair of some of our smaller vessels and the acquisition of immediately available vessels of appropriate size and functionality for use by the Coast Guard, while the current maintenance contracts which have been signed to refit the larger capital assets are ongoing, with an intention to have these assets back in service within 18 months on a phased basis. So at the end of 18 months, you'll have all the 8 large assets of the Coast Guard back in service. Of course, I'll highlight a concern or a challenge where that is concerned. Additionally, a process has commenced for the acquisition of additional new naval assets to address the identified gaps in our maritime domain awareness and control. And the issue we have with respect to the timelines for the delivery of whether it's the new assets, the refurbishments and refit of the current assets, is the global impact of shipping challenges, where items are not being shipped on a timely basis based on each other, and globally, not just Trinidad, but globally we're affected by that. And this continues to impact the acquisition or the arrival of parts and spares to get our vessels back serviceable based on hostile and damning international companies who have the responsibility based on the maintenance contracts that have been signed to get the vessels back in service. However, we will continue to work assiduously with those entities to have the naval assets serviceable for operations and the acquisition of the new assets as well. So you will see that impacting the environment, and particularly the maritime environment, very soon. Thank you.
Members of the media, as has been indicated, the Commissioner of Police has presented the officers who can provide us with more granular details on the matters that she has raised and indicated. And of course, we have the commanding officers of the respective formations of the Trinidad and Tobago Defense Force. Similarly, the floor is now open to you, members of the media, for any questions you may have in relation to the description of our efforts to deal with the problems as exist facing Trinidad and Tobago. The media.
Good afternoon, everyone. Akar Samaru, Guardian Media. Commissioner, yesterday, DCP Benjamin made a comment that the TTPS is totally in control of the crime situation and crime is not out of control. A lot of people took offense to that. Commissioner, can you honestly say that with murders where they're at right now, with extortion, do you agree with your DCP?
Whether I agree or not with the DCP, I believe the Deputy Commissioner would have made that statement based on his knowledge of our achievements so far. And yes, we have acknowledged the homicides are out of hand, but we have also acknowledged our successes in terms of the violent crime reduction.
431 murders so far this year. It's hard to look at successes in that context.
You also need to note that although we are judged on that singular index of homicides, there are other offenses under violent crime and serious crimes.
Minister Hines, do you agree that the TTPS has crime under control?
You would have heard the commissioner a moment ago, you would have heard the chief of defense staff, and you ought to know, as an educated and experienced journalist, that crime is a function of human behavior, the sinful nature of the human being. It has been with us from the beginning of time, and it continues, and therefore the struggle, the fight against crime is an ongoing pursuit. And you would have heard this morning that that struggle continues in Trinidad and Tobago, and the particular efforts, as the commissioner intimated, that are being exerted at this time to respond to the crime surge at this time in Trinidad and Tobago.
So do you agree or you don't agree?
I repeat, this is an ongoing process, and the fight against crime, because behaviors arise. New people come on the scene. New cultures take in Trinidad and Tobago. We have new challenges, some of them coming from outside of our borders. So it's an ongoing issue. And the fight from Trinidad and Tobago continues. You have heard elements of that response to it in Trinidad and Tobago today.
Okay, I'll move on. Minister, we've been here before. Spate of murders, hastily called press conference, pictures of high-level meetings, promises of increased patrols, intensified efforts, and then we're back here again, because I think we were here in July with that same promise. At that time, the murder toll was 334. It's 431 now. I mean, we all know the definition of insanity, but that aside, do you all believe this will really make a difference, or can it be seen, as some people criticize it, as optics?
If what will make a difference?
These intensified operations we were promised just now.
Well, they do. They have to. The work must continue. The response to the behavior of our citizens who commit crimes, bloody crimes, and the response to those who come into Trinidad and Tobago and commit bloody crimes must continue. Must continue. We can't stop.
But have
we
they been
can't give
successful?
up. We have to continue. Huh?
But are we seeing success?
Well, of course we are seeing some success. It's not a perfect world, and you don't get a perfect non-criminal or not, a crime-free society. So it's a work that has to continue everywhere in the world, and we are continuing that fight. And you would have heard the commissioner explain some of the techniques that have been put in place, some of the strategies to respond to it.
Okay. Before I pass on the mic, one more thing. Commissioner, when you say intensify operations, is a fear that means more roadblocks and tickets for tint and inspection stickers? Are we looking at that? Because every time we hear intensify operations, there's more roadblocks.
No, it does not. Our operations are not focusing on the removal of tints. Our operations are focusing on those prolific offenders who we know. We are focusing on our gangs, our gang members, our gang leaders, because they are the ones who are responsible for the homicides. So we'll be focusing on them. But it will, of course, entail road operations, road searches, vehicle searches, because, as I would have said before, firearms don't have wings, they traverse the roads, they are in vehicles. So at times we will ask the national community to bear with us any inconvenience on the roadway.
Commissioner, good afternoon. Annalisa Paul, Trinidad Guardian. Commissioner, early on in your tenure, when you assumed office, you would have called on the nation to pray. You know, the need for spiritual help in the fight against crime. How has that worked out, Commissioner? And outside of everything that has now been outlined and is being reinforced, what else can you offer a frightened population? Because you hear it every day. They're frightened. Persons are afraid that they're going to leave home, they're not going to get back home. Their children are in danger when they go out. They cannot walk the streets. Tell us, what else can you assure the population other than just boots on the ground? You know, investigations continue. Tell us, what else can you give them?
First, I need you to explain the preamble with the prayer. What's
Very
the point
early
you're
on
making?
when you assumed office, you called on the nation to pray because you said that we needed spiritual help as well. Now, people pray, they get up every day. But in the grand scheme of things, Commissioner, following that call, how has that worked out? Are we seeing, coupled with prayer, what else are we seeing in terms of, like Akash said, the successes?
Well, I would have outlined our initiative, the actions that we are taking, our targeted operations, and yes, we are confident that they would make a difference. And I'm saying again, you do not discount the value of prayer.
Commissioner, again, and regarding statistics now, because of course, burglaries are up, larcenies are up, break-ins are up. I stand to be corrected. I see you're pulling papers there, so perhaps you could correct us on that. It appears that the TTPS stats are lagging because we see online media outlets where there's a great disparity in the figures being given. So, the public sees one figure online and then the TTPS figures, which is behind. And the perception is that these figures are being doctored or that the police isn't being honest. What can you say in terms of that disparity?
I can assure the national community that the police service is an organization that focuses on integrity, honesty and integrity. Our department, CAPA, is responsible for the compilation of statistics. And I want to assure the national community that though you say statistics are up, so let me advise on this. We have an increase in murders. And we have a decrease in shooting and woundings. I will not go by percentages, but we have a decrease, or probably I should give you the percentage reduction. In violent crimes, we have a 15% decrease in violent crimes from 3,549 reports in 2023. We have 3,004 reports in 2024. So that's a 15% reduction. Serious reported crimes from 8,998 reports in 2023. We have 7,613 reports in 2024. That is a 15% decrease. In terms of woundings and shootings, we have a 10% decrease from 543 reports in 2023. We have 490 in 2024. And these statistics are up to September the 2nd.
Hi, good afternoon. Alicia Boucher from TV6. I remember some time ago the detection rate was about 12% in terms of homicides. Can the TTPS report what is the current detection rate at this point?
So I can report for you as of today, we have charged 76 persons for murder in 2024. We have solved 69 murders, and I stand corrected, my figure is based on data from the 2nd of September. So we are still at that figure. Thank you.
Would you happen to know, because I can't work this out quickly, but would you happen to know what percentage that that figure represents?
Is it 11.7%? That represents 11.7%.
So that's a slight drop from that 12% that we were at before.
Yes, it may be, but again, with every day that passes and with our continued investigation, we solve. So it would, and you have to remember, even though we solve based on one figure, and then even if we get more murders, then it equates up.
Okay, now, Commissioner, you mentioned surveillance, as increased surveillance, rather, as one of the measures that the TTPS would be using to combat these homicides and so on that we are seeing, this spate in homicides. In terms of the, and Minister, I'll ask you this, in terms of the CCTV camera systems across the country, can you give us an update on that? Because we know that the TTPS sometimes usually require the footage and so on from different points and entries in the country.
Very happy to advise, and you would have heard prior to our decision to acquire 2,500 cameras with modern, usable features. We had about 1,749 cameras in service for law enforcement. To those, we have now added the 2,500 of which I spoke. They have all been installed. And in our briefing up to yesterday, we are assured that they are all operational, functional, and serving in the intelligence gathering aspect of law enforcement work. And we have already announced that it is our intention, and we have already begun the process of acquiring yet another 2,500 cameras for installation across Trinidad and Tobago in places as recommended by the Commissioner of Police, the Police Service, and the intelligence agencies based on their observation of the crime patterns across the place, as indeed the 2,005 that we have just installed were, in other words, put on the advice of law enforcement. But as you were talking about successes a while ago, I am aware that we have had some successes, and Minister Scotland.
Good afternoon all. We, specifically as it relates to extortion, coming from a meeting with the Shogunas Chamber about 3 weeks ago, and coming from the sphere of private practice, there were 2 cases of extortion that attracted my attention just before I left private practice, and it was a very live issue. In the past 3 weeks, Officer Smith is here and he will tell the country about the successes, but the Ministry of National Security and the TTPS have stepped up the drive against the elimination of the spectre of extortion. And I will ask Officer Smith to tell the country and to tell the business community what is being done in that regard and the successes that have come to the fore in that regard.
Thank you, Minister.
Could you join us?
Good afternoon to the head table and to the viewing and listening public of Trinidad and Tobago. As it relates to extortion, we have in fact been seeing some successes in that regard. I would just give a bit of history as it relates to extortion at this time, or what we call demanding money by menaces, which is the correct term for these offenses. When the monies are actually received by the perpetrators, it is actually a robbery. So there's the demand, and then it's the robbery. In 2022, we went back in a bit of history. There were only 16 reports of demanding money by menaces, and 7 of those were solved, persons were arrested. In 2023, there were 162 reports. But hear this, 134 of these reports were committed by 2 persons, a husband and wife team, that extorted money from 1 victim. 134 charges were laid against them in Southern Division while I was there in 2023. Now we had 10 more offenses were charged, persons were charged for 10 more offenses and made it 144 persons charged or offenses solved for demanding money by menaces. In 2024, thus far, we have 19 reports of demanding money by menaces. And as of Monday, we had 2 additional persons were charged, making it 9 counts of demanding money by menaces of being solved. So we have approximately 48% detection rate as it relates to demanding money by menaces. What we are doing is, it's not a simple investigation because we have these cowards hiding behind phones and making these demands. So it's not so easy to investigate, but we are in fact investigating them as the reports come in. But we have persons going to the media and saying that they are being extorted, but we cannot imagine what has taken place. We need to get the reports. So I'm urging the members of the public, the business community, to make the reports so that we could actually investigate them, because we are having some level of success. But if we do not make the reports, and then we cannot investigate. Additionally, for us to investigate, we need some level of cooperation from the victims, and we are not getting this level of cooperation. So on one hand, persons are complaining, we are being extorted, persons are demanding money from us, but on the other hand, you do not want to assist the officers or cooperate in the investigations. So I'm urging members of the public, please, if you make the reports, cooperate with us, because we need that level of cooperation. Let's put these men behind bars. It's cowards hiding behind phones and demanding money. Yes. I have a number that you can communicate with the team.
Yes, please.
797-3150, 797-3150.
And Officer Smith, as you're there, the issue of home invasions, which is something that is very topical. Can you tell the populace what is being done in that regard?
Thank you very much, Minister. I will. Yes, as it relates to home invasions, now we know this is something that is happening where persons are panicking now because of the amount of home invasions. This has been here from time immemorial, but it's more prevalent now because it is coming into the social media and other means. We are hearing about it, but this has always been there. We have burglaries, we have housebreaking and larcenies, but what we term home invasion is when you're actually home and the perpetrators come in your house and meet you and rob you there. This is where, because we have houses are being broken all the time, but nobody is at home. But when you are there and they actually come and you are in their presence and they put you in fear and take your money or your valuables and even beat you, this is where we term it the home invasions. It's an American term that we took, right? So what we are doing, we are trying to educate the public as it relates to hardening yourself as targets. We are looking to improve our community defense mechanism. Now we're looking at the community defense, which is neighborhood watch groups. We're looking at Project Eagle Eye that we just established in the Tunapuna district, and it is spreading throughout Trinidad and Tobago. Up to last night, we were in Princestown sharing the information as it relates to these cameras. Now, Project Eagle Eye is a series of cameras that we are placing strategically in different business areas. We started in Tunapuna. Our launch was on the 6th of March this year, and we have been spreading our wings to different parts of Trinidad. We haven't reached Tobago as yet, but it is in fact taking roots. We have had persons from Northeastern Division subscribing. We have persons from Southern Division, Western Division, Port of Spain Division businessmen from Charlotte Street recently called us. So it's spreading wings. We have some additional features, which I will not reveal here, but it's a surprise for the criminal elements. When they come, they will have to take what they get, because we are in fact preparing ourselves for them. We are making ourselves hard targets, the communities. So it's not only business community alone, it's residential areas as well, buying into the Eagle Eye project. Now we also have education, which is community development as well, empowerment for persons to know exactly what is taking place. So we have our walkabouts, we have our town meetings, we have our station council meetings that persons should be aware of and attend these meetings so you can air your views, share your advice with us. You know, we are willing to take advice of anyone, but we need to work as a team so that we could keep these criminals where they're supposed to be. Now, additionally, we have our normal investigations, which we use our technology as well as our scientific approach. But the fact is, we are working together with all stakeholders, community, business persons, to get this under control, and we are expecting the assistance of the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. Remember, you must know where your children are, you know, and the Commissioner alluded to it. We are going to take some of the parents to task because the young children are committing crimes. Recently, the description of 3 persons who went to extort or demand money from a particular businessman was 1 person between the ages of 17 and 22, and 2 around the age of 8. And I'm saying 8 years. And do you know where your children are on a daily basis, especially during the Java vacation? Do you know where your children are? You must be responsible for your children and their whereabouts. So thank you very much to the panel. Sure.
Well, sorry. Yeah. The reluctance of business persons to report and then to further collaborate would you say why it is? I could imagine that maybe there's fear, and maybe there is not quite they're not sure if the police would move as quickly as the criminal element in, So if you want to say, like, why there is a fear or why there is this reluctance to collaborate, and what would you want to say by way of reassurance, please?
Thank you for that question. And I'll be speculating here. But we know that persons have a fear of crime. So that is one of the major issues. But we also have initiatives that we want to put in place, and we need the cooperation of the victim to do that, right? We know that persons have trust issues as well. That's the reason for the commissioner creating this team and having this number that I just made available, so that you will have that level of confidentiality. So, we are trying to make things easier for persons when they have these reports to reach out to the police so that we could properly investigate them. I'm not standing here and saying that we could solve every single one, but, give us the opportunity to try and not just go out and say that the police not doing anything. It's unfair to make those kind of statements when they never made a report in the first instance. So that's what I'm asking members of the public to do. While I understand you may be fearful, but still come forward. There must be somebody you can trust, some officer or even some senior officer you can go to.
Okay, so let me just follow up on Joan's question there, because, we know that while most officers might be law-abiding, we do have one or two rogue elements within the police service. And a lot of times you talk to people on the ground, they're afraid to report things like extortion because they might be afraid that there may be an officer that is perhaps working with these criminals. What assurance can you give to them in relation to that number and that system that you're trying to set up to deal with this issue of extortion?
Okay. Well, the assurance I can give them is that this is a highly confidential number. The persons who are receiving these calls have been properly vetted, and they are in fact trustworthy persons that would be receiving these reports, and then I'll be coordinating the investigations as it relates to these.
Thank you. I wanted to ask a question to the Commissioner. We heard Mr. Daniel say a short while ago that the Defense Force is at the beck and call of the TTPS in terms of whatever it needs, manpower, additional manpower, and so on. And I wanted to ask, do you think that there is a need for perhaps maybe the setting up of camps and so on, especially in these areas that we are seeing high criminal activity, where there's a joint effort in terms of the TTPS and soldiers on the ground?
So when you speak to camps, you also speak like how we would have set up police posts, right?
That is correct.
Okay. But we cannot, at every area where we identify as hot, set up a post. But what we'll do, we will manage our resources so we can have proper deployment of resources in all hot areas.
Is there a need for that increased collaboration in terms of, because I know that a lot of members of the public, they may feel a bit more, I want to put safe or reassured when they see that mixture of police and Defense Force personnel. Do you think there needs to be an increase of that on the roads? Okay.
Now, there are a number of joint patrols, and what happens, we are focused on the hot areas. So persons may complain that they are not seeing joint patrols, but our efforts are focused on the hot, high crime, high violence areas. So if you live in an area that does not normally have violent crime, what you will see are the routine police patrols.
Okay, and I just have this question for Mr. Daniel, because you gave us an update just now on the Coast Guard vessels. So I wanted to ask, or just your clarification, at this point, do we have any of the larger vessels in operation, or is it just the interceptors? And can you just give us an idea of what the fleet's supposed to look like compared to what we have in operation in the different departments or the different types of vessels that we're supposed to have, as opposed to what is operational?
Thank you very much for that question. Before I answer that question, I want to add to what was said by the Commissioner of Police to your question a little while ago. in terms of the support by the Defence Force, and you asked about camps being placed in certain areas to respond to that, I want you to consider that the response to crime has to be dynamic. You can't locate yourself, because then you have the issue of people knowing where you are. And we know that they'll put lookouts and stuff to tell you when vehicles leave to go on patrols and stuff. So we will do all our operations based on intelligence. So you will just feel the effect of what we need to do to address the crime situation. So the camps thing is not something that you will see happening because of experience that we have had, and we continue to have even where we come from. So we try our best to use intelligence to have effective operations, because what the population needs to experience is the success of the operations and get back that confidence, which we will continue to work with the police to ensure that we achieve. In terms of your question with respect to the vessels, the large assets are being brought back on stream, as I said, on a phased basis. You would appreciate that we don't have dockyards here that are required based on the age of these vessels. So one vessel would have just returned from Suriname where it was dry docked and is now in Stobels Bay doing the further work. So there will be a certain amount of work that you do on the dry docks for obvious reasons to get at the hull, then the other work that you have to do, and in particular there's some of the equipment that needs to be replaced based on becoming obsolete, based on the technology that is available that will make the Coast Guard more effective. So on a phased basis, you'll see these larger vessels coming back into service to provide that maritime domain awareness and control. With respect to the smaller interceptors, I would have highlighted earlier that we have received funding to address those that we can, and you will see that being impacted before the month's end with respect to those vessels being serviceable and impacting the maritime domain awareness. With respect to the question of the expansion of the fleet, I interpret that is what you're asking. There should be an increase of approximately 30 vessels, smaller interceptors and mid-sized launches to complement the larger vessels, based, as I said, on the gap that has been identified by the Coast Guard of what is required to, as best as possible, have that maritime domain awareness and control. You'd appreciate as an island, it's impossible to be everywhere. So again, our operations will be intelligence-led, using the radar, coastal radar system that has been approved for upgrade, and that process is also ongoing, so that we're using technology and intelligence to drive our operations to bring success to bear.
So just to make sure I have clarity, you said one of the larger vessels, that one should come back on stream soon. So is it that at this time, we have none of the large vessels that are functional?
Currently, correct. But they are the last two hostile vessels are here, and they would more than likely be back in service quite quickly. The one that I spoke about is probably going to take about another month or thereabouts, 2 months before that is fully back in service. But the hostiles, based on the issues, and I highlighted the challenge of the international shipping global phenomenon, where you want to get parts, but you have to get it on a vessel to come from Holland, and that continues to be a challenge. As soon as that issue, and it is being addressed urgently by Hostal to get, and this is I mixed up Damen for Holland, but Hostal is Australia, where we have to get the parts from. So they are making all the efforts to get the parts that are required to get those vessels back in service. And that's the two Hostal Cape-class vessels.
So the 30 additional that you mentioned that you would need to close the gap that you were speaking about just now, and I just want to, again, have further clarity. You are talking about the 30 additional in addition to what is currently in operation to close that gap, or is it an overall expansion of the fleet?
That speaks to an overall expansion based on the gap. So that is going to take a longer time frame, obviously. And it's about 15 interceptors by 15 launches. But before that comes on, so that's medium to long term. Immediately we should have, as I said earlier, within 18 months, the larger assets that we have, that's the 6 Damen and the 2 Hostals back in full service, in addition to the interceptors that work along with those. But in the interim, immediately, we have been given authority, and we are pursuing getting appropriate vessels that are immediately available to come to our operational capabilities.
Just to follow up on that, earlier the commissioner would have mentioned some challenges with illegal migrants. We have what we just heard from the Chief of Defense Staff there. Given the challenge of what happened there, why is such a critical arm of national security under-resourced?
It is not a question of under-resourcing. It is a question, well, the 30 vessels you would have heard about, the experts in the platform suggest that optimally, for optimal protection around these islands, we should have those, as the CDS explained, so we are working towards that. In terms of the maintenance of the vessels, as I would have indicated earlier, maintenance, and as I understand it, is an ongoing and a routine kind of thing. You have routine maintenance, then you have issues with breakdowns and that sort of thing. So that is ongoing. And the way we structured it is that these vessels will go intermittently and come back. One has come back and will be put into service shortly, as the CDS said, and the others are for dry docking in this cycle of maintenance and upgrade. It is not about under-resourcing.
Just my education, what can parents be charged with if their child is found to be in criminal activity?
Well, that is a matter for the police, and I would make that available. I make the floor available to the police in this regard. I don't think I understood Mr. Smith saying parents will be charged. I understand him to say parents will be held accountable. But of course, there are offenses under the children's package of legislation for neglect and that sort of thing, and persons have been charged for those. But I'll leave that to the police for fuller explanation. Please.
Well, so you have quite competently, of course, alluded to the amended Children's Act that gives the appropriate statutory guidance for having parents account for their children. Yeah, I believe it's Section 4. You know, that's one of the considerations there.
Give me an example. So a child found to be in gang activity, let's say 13 years old, how can the parent be held accountable?
Well, an inquiry would have to be done certainly to determine whether the parent erred in exercising control over their children in whatever circumstance existed. You know, so it's not an automatic charge. An investigation will be done, but certainly it is a possibility, and as we are saying, it is something that is being considered to have, which is a national cry that has been occurring, and it is something that we are actively exploring to use this statutory framework to give manifestation to that public outcry. So parents.
So it's never been done before, it's being explored now?
I would say that I have never done it before, and it is something that we have collectively give consideration to exploring.
There's also the anti-gang legislation, which sort of puts an onus, just not on parents, but on other family members to ensure that they report that type of activity. So that is one part of the sleuth of legislation that is there. There's the Education Act, which mandates that children of a certain age must be in school, and any breach of that puts the parent in potential criminal liability. So those are three pieces of legislation, Mr. Samru, which are there for parents to observe, and there's also the common law of aiding and abetting. The common law of aiding and abetting.
And might I add, there's a video circulating as we speak with, I think, 3 youngsters in a classroom, and the teacher is there trying his best to deliver the day's offerings for their development, and the 3 youngsters are seen in the video gambling. That is a serious challenge to their future. And this is why I agree with my colleague and those who spoke before that there has to be some accountability on the part of parents who send these children to that environment. They're probably disturbing the rest of the class as well. So this is the kind of accountability that I think I heard Mr. Smith speak about. And strangely, yesterday, I received a call from one of my constituents, And she reported to me, and I haven't had an opportunity to report it to the police commissioner for the morning as yet, but yesterday evening I received a call where as late, and it's something I alluded to before, where as late or early, depending on how you look at it, at 3, she told me, as late as 3 a.m. in the morning, children of primary school years are on the streets in their community. That is a straight question for parents. And she is suggesting, which I will share with the commissioner in greater detail, that the police come in at that hour. Well, I know the police patrol, but to pay particular attention to this. And for the police to investigate this to see whether that might constitute some evidence for neglect. 3 a.m. I questioned her. I said, you mean 3 o'clock a.m.? She told me, yes, Mr. Hines. I said, okay, we have a serious problem here. And for the government, in addition to all of the efforts that you would have heard from the commissioner, from the chief of defense staff, and from the officers here about what law enforcement is doing, the government, understanding the importance of the proper development of the nation's children, because in a few months, the youngsters who you saw in the video to which I alluded a while ago will be in our national community on the road, as it were, having graduated from school. And the government, in recognition of this, has dedicated tremendous resources, starting with the 6 or 7 billion a year for the same education system that they seem to be turning their back on in that video. In the Ministry of Community Development and Sport, a tremendous amount of resources are directed for the development of the nation's youth in sport and community development. In the Ministry of Social Development. And then we have the Ministry of Youth Development. At 3 p.m. this evening, we go to a graduation of MILAT students. Those are those who might not have made it through secondary school and absorbed the academic program there. They go into a MILAT program. So all of the ministries, including the Ministry of National Security, but most of all the Ministry of Youth Development and National Service, is designed towards dealing with the young people, perhaps in many cases where the parents are not doing it. So the call from the police for parental accountability is, to my mind, very critical and to be supported.
And there's one corollary to the question that you asked. It really takes an entire country to arrest this situation that is occurring now. So the commissioner can do what the commissioner can do within her powers along with her officers. The chief of defense can do what he can do, but I would just respectfully suggest the attention to personal responsibility and where we are looking to head as a country. That video was disturbing in many ways, in that the goalpost has been moved. I am not saying at school that, and I was never part of that, but people would not do something like that. But not whilst the teacher is in class, that's the first thing, and not so brazenly, because there's a time and a place for everything. So as we are here trying to address and arrest this situation, I would ask the population to look at personal responsibility also in order to assist us in the fight against all aspects of crime and criminality in Trinidad and Tobago. We cannot do it alone.
Is there any consideration for new legislation for parental responsibility? Because all these things are peripheral that you mentioned. But is there any discussion about the possibility of new legislation?
The legislation is sufficient. We think that the legislation as it stands now is relatively sufficient to deal with it. It places a responsibility on the parent to ensure that a child of school age is in school. I don't think we could go into every house and insist, but that's a responsibility. It's a responsibility, and I dare say that my mother took very, very, very seriously, and it's a responsibility that I asked all parents to take very, very seriously. The legislation is there, it's in place, it just needs to be acted upon.
Just a couple of questions from our Tobago correspondent, Elizabeth Gonzalez. It's for the Commissioner of Police, one of them. She said that TPP leader, Fali Augustine, has accused the People's National Movement of abusing police power to terrorize THA executives. Can you comment on that?
No, I cannot comment on that. I have no idea what Mr. Farley is speaking about.
And this would be for DCP Martin, if you don't mind. She was asking, what is Mr. Trevor James being investigated for? She said his home was searched and devices seized, and she understands there are several investigations involving him that are ongoing, but which one is the seizure linked to, if you can share that?
Can you repeat that, sir?
Okay, so with respect to Mr. Trevor James, she said that she understands that
Who is she?
Elizabeth Gonzalez.
Oh, okay.
Yes, our Tobago correspondent, yes. She said that with respect to Mr. Trevor James, his home was searched and his devices seized, and she's asking which investigation is this linked to?
So that is an ongoing investigation. I am not going to comment on it at this time. It's at a sensitive stage, and when the investigation is over, we'll answer all the questions that you have.
I will just ask this question. This is coming from Elizabeth Williams from Tobago. She said the Tobago People's Party has labeled the search of Mr. James's home as a PNM search. Could you comment on it?
Just say, we have come together this morning to report to the national community about what they must expect in response to the upsurge in crime, as we said. And I think we expect that you would focus on that so that the public would benefit from what this forum is really intended for. Of course, we can't dictate what you would think about and what you would ask, but I would suggest that we keep this discussion focused on the nation's response through law enforcement to the crimes and the criminality that afflicts us.
Minister Hines, following arising out of yesterday's meeting of the NSC, can you say whether or not the call or the state of emergency, any sort of, if that had arisen at all yesterday, even being considered at this time?
Essentially, the meeting yesterday, without taking tales too much out of school, had to do with the National Security Council representing the people of Trinidad and Tobago, wanting to hear from law enforcement how it was about to respond, to the situation that affronts us. They reported accordingly, and a decision was taken to have them report to you this morning. That was the extent of the discussion.
And one last thing, in 2012, when the Prime Minister would have occupied the opposition benches at that time, he made a statement then that if the government can't deal with crime, then the government itself is part of the problem. It's 12 years later, and we're seeing, of course, the problem is worse, and we're seeing higher, murder stats. And Dr. Rowley, by that standard now, can you say, sitting there, are you willing, as Minister of National Security, can you accept that pronouncement now? Because we're seeing that you're coming here today to report to the nation what can be done and what is being done. But of course, we're seeing the figures going up. We're seeing that fear, the trauma, the fear is there. So can you now, judging by what he would have said then, going with that?
As Akash Samaru alluded to in one of his interventions earlier, that which you have described is not new. Those of us who have been around long enough, we would have seen this kind of upsurge from time to time. So all we are doing here today is presenting to you, the national community, what the response from law enforcement will be in relation to the upsurge that is traumatizing the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago today. Suppressing it, eradicating it where it is possible, using the laws and the Constitution and the tremendous experience and hard work of the police service supported by the Defense Force. And as Minister Scotland urged, the personal responsibility that we expect from every single right-thinking citizen who complain about this, who are affected by it, that we all in the whole of government, whole of society context, where we, the government, in last year, I think it was, or year before, last year, identified this crime problem as a public health concern and treating it as such. So the comments by my colleague about the whole of government approach and the responsibility of every single one of us to be sober, to be reflective, and to do whatever we can, wherever we are, to pushing back this situation for all of our collective benefit. That is the focus.
Hi, Minister Sonolala, TTT News. The Owner Dealers Association yesterday would have sent out a media release saying there's now a threat of them from their members of having 24/7 service stations. We've seen recently there was a shooting at a popular gas station on Ryson Road. Just earlier this week, there was one on Charlieville service station. Can you lend any advice or any response to them?
Well, we would have heard from the Commissioner earlier today that gang activity accounts for about 60 to 65% of the murders of which we complain. And gangs go, as we have seen, as you members of the media, wherever they have an opportunity to strike their enemies. The one to which you just made reference, Sunil, as far as I recall, took place on Ryson Road at a service station where someone who may have been associated with a gang went there for service and his enemies took the opportunity to attack him. It means it can happen anytime, anywhere. But DCP Martin and the other officers here are very adept at dealing with the question of gangs. So if you wish to get more in terms of how they are responding to the gangland activity in Trinidad and Tobago, they are all available for your further question. Thank you.
Just a question to the Commissioner. You mentioned the police will be coming for both legal and illegal migrants into the country in terms of who is involved in criminal activity. Can you shed some light on this and how this will be done, if it will be done with immigration and so on?
Yes, we have a collaboration with immigration, but I want you to be clear on what I said. I said we have legal and illegal immigrants involved in criminal activities, right? And yes, we will be.
Will there be any particular area of focus, possibly the Southwestern Peninsula?
Illegal immigrants operate throughout the country. So we will be focusing, each division will be focusing on the illegal immigrants and illegal activities.
Just finally for me, just some clarification from Mr. Smith in terms of, I know you said there was either 19 or 90 reports of extortion, and just finally in terms of, have you calculated a figure in terms of the amount of money that would have been successfully extorted so far?
No, unfortunately, I don't have that figure at this stage, but I can always relay that to you.
19?
It was 19 reports of, yes, demanding money by menaces for the year thus far.
Okay, can I, this microphone has been very busy circulating. I wanted to talk to Commissioner, because it's kind of a rare occasion that we actually do get to see you, so it's very nice to have you. So on a Venezuelan issue, and we really don't want to be xenophobic about things, we don't want this to become like a red herring or xenophobic, so forgive me. But I do want to ask, what specific measures will be put? For example, I think a priest said that there should be Spanish-speaking police. In fact, even Venezuelan nationals should be allowed to join. Is there collaboration with the authorities in Venezuela? And the third thing, would there be like a Spanish-speaking hotline? Because now, this might sound airy-fairy, but I actually had an extremely weird experience about a week ago when I was kind of approached by somebody claiming to be an illegal human trafficking victim, and carried her to a station in East Trinidad, and it was just blank faces Nobody spoke a word of Spanish. Nobody was interested. Nobody could point in a direction. They asked, well, was there a Spanish-speaking hotline that the whole police service could refer somebody to? If there's one operator that could serve whichever police station could feed persons to, it was just a big zero. So I want to know what sort of assurances, or, because, I mean, these are people, are here, residents here now. So if you could give any assurance.
I think I should venture an answer to that, if you didn't mind. We have the counter-trafficking unit established under the laws of Trinidad and Tobago, and their purpose is to deal with reports of, and to investigate and to treat with matters of human trafficking in the context of what you have just described. And yes, they do have the facility of Spanish-speaking interpreters, and there are hotlines, and their messages are sent out bilingually in that sense, and therefore the answer to the question is yes. And I would like to suggest that you direct that person to the counter-trafficking unit, and I assure you that all will flow smoothly from there.
I think I would want to ask the Commissioner, though, because I really think that there should be the front-line officers, police officers in the station, where, because we have how many, I don't know what number of stations we have spread all across Trinidad and Tobago, but there should be like an awareness. I mean, this was a major city that I carried this lady to, I directed her to, and there wasn't an awareness of this. So I'm saying that your frontline people need to be tapped into things. You know what I'm saying? Like, we may have highfalutin plans, but there was definitely, I'm not at grassroots level with the officer, I'm just not seeing that awareness.
Okay, thank you so very much for the question, and your suggestion is a very good one. First, I want to clarify, when I speak illegal immigrants, I did not say Venezuelans. So let us get that.
Could you say what country you
meant? I did not I was not specific to say Venezuelans, so I said illegal immigrants. So I want to get that clear. In terms of Spanish, we have implemented Spanish language courses for officers. So right now we don't have, we cannot say we have 25% or 10% of our officers with the ability to speak or comprehend Spanish, but we are working on it. And in terms of your hotline, I think that is something that we can put in place, because we do have officers who are fluent in Spanish.
So we can look forward to seeing that.
But you have to understand, learning a language takes time.
Right. Well, I would like to thank you, members of the media, for your attendance today at this press conference, and seeing that you have exhausted your questions, I think it is appropriate for me to thank the Commissioner of Police and her officers for their attendance and making themselves available to you, members of the media. Equally, to thank the Chief of Defense Staff for his presence, intervention, and making available the commanding officers of the respective formations, and of course the operations officer of the Defense Force. And of course, I would like to thank my colleague and fellow minister here in the Ministry of National Security, Mr. Keith Scotland of Senior Counsel, for your intervention. We thank you all profusely, and we are on the job to go out there and deal with this problem in the way you are entitled to expect. Good luck and God bless. We thank you.
Roy Keep, a name that inspires awe and admiration.
Sent to live at the Belmont Orphanage when he was 12 years old, Roy Cape never lost interest in his first love, music. In fact, that love grew, it consumed him. An accomplished saxophonist, arranged